Greetings, social media land. This is Ted Victor, founder of the Broward Social Network. Today is Wednesday, July the 29th at approximately 7 p.m. We have Mr. Wayne Clark, candidate for Broward County Sheriff. Mr. Clark is no stranger to the Broward Social Network. He was here with us a few months ago when we did the very first Sheriff's Forum in the state of Florida. Now he's back for an exclusive, a 1-hour interview so that you, the candidates, can get to know him a little bit better. Mr. Clark, welcome back.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you very much for having me. I'm glad to be back. Thank you.
Mr. Clark, we have quite a few items to discuss in an hour, and I'm hoping to discuss all of them. And for the record, all candidates who are a sheriff or a candidate for sheriff in Broward County are invited for a 1-hour exclusive interview for the sake of their campaign, for the sake that the community can get to know them better, because most of the times when you have these debates and these forums, you have just pretty much 2 minute, maybe 1 minute responses. So now is the opportunity for you, the viewers in Broward County, to get to know the candidate of your choice a little bit better here in the Broward Social Network. Excuse me. Mr. Clark, introduce yourself once again and tell us why you're running for sheriff in Broward County.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening, actually. Again, my name is Wayne Clark, and I'm running for sheriff in Broward County. I'm the Republican candidate running. First and foremost, I believe that safety is nonpartisan. I believe that this job has nothing to do with whether you're Republican or a Democrat. I think that safety has nothing to do with whether or not you're Republican or a Democrat. If any of you are driving tonight and you get pulled over, I certainly hope that the officer that approaches your car doesn't ask you if you're a Republican or a Democrat. I kicked off my campaign about 15 months ago after seeing the destruction that's taken place at Broward Sheriff's Office over the last couple of administrations. And, you know, I started by talking to a number of different deputies, fire, EMS, bailiffs, detention employees, and found out how broken that agency really is, how low the morale really is. For the first time in history, there's been 2 votes of no confidence. So, you know, throughout the last year, I've had many conversations, and we've attended a number of forums. Actually, Ted, yours was the first. Yours seemed to be the one where we were asked the most questions, which is interesting.
Really?
Because you're right. Yeah, you're right. Yours, you know, I think we actually had maybe more candidates in the race back then too. I'm not sure.
Yes,
but,
we did. We did.
Yeah, but the way you moderated it was kind of rapid fire. And so after watching all of those or participating actually in all those forums, I can see why, you know, the agency is broken as it is and where it needs to be repaired and what needs to be rebuilt. And one of the things that bothers me so much is the lack of trust in the community in Broward Sheriff's Office. Broward Sheriff's Office is a public safety agency, and it's being run very inefficiently. It's being run in a manner where the leader becomes more of a dictator and more of a tyrant, and it scares a lot of really good men and women away. So throughout the last year, I've spent a great deal of time developing an advisory board of current local and state law enforcement, fire and EMS individuals, mental health, because that's a big part of my platform, human resources, and various other areas of specialty. Because as you know, Broward Sheriff's Office is way more than just law enforcement. In fact, it touches every citizen in Broward County in one way or another. It's responsible for the seaport, the airport, Department of Detention, which are the jails. It's responsible for the bailiffs in the courthouse, the safety of the courthouse. It's responsible for you know, call centers, law enforcement, fire, EMS, mental health, which is huge, as well as the community support programs. So BSO is way more than law enforcement. And I think if you look at what's going on in America today, it's time to refocus that agency and make it more efficient and better to serve the community and make the community safer as a whole.
Okay, so let's go back and try to look at a few specific things, but I'd like to get to know you better as a candidate, because I believe you're running for the most important job in the county, considering that you're going to be ultimately responsible for the safety of all of the residents of Broward County. Talk to us about your upbringing. Are you originally from Broward County?
So I'm originally born and raised in North Carolina. My family located to North Carolina back in the 60s and early 70s. I was born and raised there, went to high school there, and that's actually where I served in the military. I served at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, when I was in the United States Army.
And then how did you end up in Florida?
So when I left the military, I knew that I wanted to go into the business world, and I wanted to see what I could do as far as making change. So
thank you.
I applied
Thank you for your service, by the way.
Thank you. So I started looking around at different law schools. At the time, my sister-in-law lived down here in Cooper City. I had come down here to visit the area, and I fell in love with it. I liked the idea of how culturally diverse we are, and it's even more so now. It's even grown even more so now. But I also liked the weather. I liked the environment. I liked the fact that it is such a large county, but you can live in parts of the county and still feel like a hometown feeling. And so when I came down here, I found Plantation, Florida, and it's been home ever since. I love that city. It's a great city, and I don't see ever leaving. I've been here since 2001, and I'm raising my son, who's 10 years old. He goes to public school in Plantation. So it has Florida, and South Florida in particular, has so much more to offer the people who live here, the people who visit here, than other parts of the country. North Carolina, I love it. My family still lives there. But every time they come here, they understand why I stay and why I call it home now.
Now, do you have a professional relationship with law enforcement?
So what I do for a living is I'm obviously a lawyer, and I do investigations dealing with homicides, murders, wrongful death, personal injuries, crimes against persons, crimes against properties. I also do fire, arson investigations. So throughout my career, I have interacted with BSO, Plantation, Fort Lauderdale, Davie Police Department. And what I do is I practice all over the state of Florida, from Homestead all the way to Jacksonville, Pensacola. So I interact with a large number of law enforcement agencies, mostly with BSO because most of my work is in Broward County, but I work with law enforcement officers and agents and agencies all over the state. So my work is typically dealing with detectives, looking into files, dealing with public records, dealing with investigations that have occurred at commercial properties or private residence.
By the way, did you go to law school in North Carolina or here in Florida?
Down here in Florida.
At Nova?
At Nova Southeastern. Yes, sir.
Right up the street in Davie. So considering your line of work, it makes sense that you have had some sort of relationship or some sort of history at observing how crime was being managed in Broward County.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah, so you possibly found some level of dissatisfaction as to how the cases were being handled?
So one of the clients that I represent, it's probably my largest client, to be honest with you, has seen a lot of crime at their properties. There's a lot, there's two things that go on Broward County that not a lot of people talk about, not a lot of people discuss. There's sex trafficking, prostitution, and then there's also elderly exploitation.
Wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah, and actually, elderly exploitation, if you look at what's going on in Broward County, it's probably just as bad, if not as bad, as the oxycodone issue that we had a few years ago, where South Florida was basically run by pill mills. And what's going on is someone has an elderly family member that's being exploited by someone. They call the sheriff's office or they call local law enforcement. Local law enforcement tells them there's nothing we could do. It's a civil matter. That's not true. It is a crime. It's a felony to exploit the elderly. There's no doubt about it. We need to address those issues, especially in South Florida, because we have, a large population of elderly individuals. With the human trafficking and sex trafficking, that's huge. We're right here by international airports in Miami and Fort Lauderdale, And so a lot of that comes through our county, and we don't address it the way it should be addressed. It needs to be, fix that. There needs to be certain units that take, those things away. Human trafficking to me is a massive problem. Sex trafficking, massive problem.
How would you address such a major topic? Because myself as well, I have spoken to several organizations and several individuals interested in addressing sex trafficking and child trafficking everywhere all over the world, especially in our backyard in Broward County. How would you address that as a sheriff?
Well, look, you've got to have task force that's what they do, right? They go in, they try to eliminate that crime. You have to have task force that are able to communicate on a federal level as well as a state level with other agencies and international. And we need to, build relationships, and we need to develop those programs or those task force to be able to identify the issues, identify the problems, and then, take out the crime. It's an international problem, no doubt. I don't know if you remember, but during the Super Bowl here, how many ads did we see about human trafficking? How many signs did we see through the area about human trafficking? When you have large sporting events such as the Super Bowl, that brings a lot of that to the county. But that was already here, and it's still here today. So we need to address those issues by developing the right task force, by developing communications and trust with other agencies. There's a lot of individual agencies that go after, human trafficking when it comes to minors, sex trafficking and things like that. And we need to tap into some of those independent organizations to help, because we need the information. You got to have the information to be able to get rid of the issues.
Right. Now, I do not envy your endeavors, Mr. Clark. However, there are quite a few number of current events that we must address, considering where we are in 2020 in these summer months. One of them is police brutality. As a candidate for sheriff, please talk to the public, because hundreds and thousands of viewers will see this interview, and I personally would like to know, what are your thoughts on police brutality? Well,
first and foremost, I think with regard to Broward Sheriff's Office, I think we need to change the culture, and that starts with the leader. The culture of an organization is determined or dictated by who's leading that organization, and so it starts at the top. That individual has to be able to take self-responsibility, identify those issues. If you can't understand or you can't see that there are issues, you can't fix those issues.
Correct.
And we clearly have a problem in America with lack of trust of law enforcement, with lack of respect of law enforcement, with lack of trust in the community. So we've got to work on that. We've got to fix that. It's in any industry, nobody likes a bad apple, right? There's good cops, there's bad cops, there's good teachers, bad teachers, good lawyers, bad lawyers. With law enforcement, though, there's no real room for bad apples. So you have to be able to find people through the hiring and training process that use common sense, good common judgment, because these ladies and gentlemen, or these men and women that are in law enforcement, they're asked to make split-second decisions. And we need them to have that judgment to be able to make those split-second decisions in the right way. We also need to deal with it with training, because, training doesn't fix everything, but we do need to make sure we have the proper training in place, the best practices, because what happened in Minnesota was egregious. That should never happen. Fortunately, in Broward County, Broward Sheriff's Office hasn't had those type of techniques in use and training in many years. So that's one thing that's good about Broward County, is that we don't do those things. But
I'm glad
also,
pardon me, Mr. Clark, I'm glad that you mentioned Minnesota. In your opinion, do Black Lives matter?
Ted, in my opinion, in my heart, all lives matter. So therefore, yes, Black Lives Matter. All lives matter.
Is there a difference between, and I'll give you my response to that question, is there a difference between Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter? Well,
this is the way first of all, I have a 10-year-old son. I try to teach my son to be colorblind, right? Because racism in America exists. There is no doubt about it. If someone says that racism doesn't exist, then they're lying, they're blind, or they just don't want to admit what's going on in America. I believe all lives matter because every life is precious, and I believe everyone should be treated equally and fairly, and no one should be treated differently based on their race, their sexual orientation, or anything like that. It needs to be, look, racism is there. It's something that needs to be addressed. It's 2020. Why we still have racism? That's to be blamed on all of us that are adults now that don't teach our kids the right thing. Are we ever going to totally get rid of racism? Probably not. But I certainly hope that that we can find a way as a society to get rid of it, because it's not right. I'm a white man. I
appreciate your response, and please forgive me, and I do not mean to meet your response. I'd like to know, is there a difference between Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter? And I will give you my response to that as well. And again, I do not mean to put you on the spot, because you said All Lives Matter, and I don't think anybody would disagree with that. But is there a difference between Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter?
Well, is there a difference? I mean, I think all lives matter, so therefore Black Lives Matter. Is there a difference? I mean, look, is there a difference? I don't think there is. I think all lives matter. I think all life is precious, no matter what the life is. And so, have people, have African Americans been treated differently throughout the history of America? Of course. Yeah, absolutely. Was it right? No. And no, we've moved to try to change those things, but the way I see it is we all matter. We're all human beings. We all get up in the morning, we all get dressed the same. So,
right.
I mean,
right.
tell me what you think about it, because it's important to me to know as well.
It's important as well. And as an educator, I try to tell people, I look at it as they're synonyms, right? So no one will argue that all lives matter. However, you wonderfully have pointed out that there are segments in our society who have not been treated the same, which means that some people who possibly look like myself, have been given the shorter end of the stick for whatever reason. So the analogy has been given whereby if there's a house on fire in a neighborhood, all the houses need water, but at that time, the house on fire needs water the most, right? So there is no such thing, or it's impossible for all lives to matter without Black lives. It's impossible for all lives to matter without white lives. It's impossible for all lives to matter without Native American lives. So Black lives matter because, excuse me, all lives matter. There's no way that all lives can matter without Black lives, right? However, as you wonderfully stated, right, there are injustices that have happened to various groups, not just African Americans, not just Latin Americans, but to various segments in our society. And to some degree, we see that played out on the news, on social media in Minneapolis. And we have to be able to at least attempt to make sure that certain segments are not targeted for a knee on the neck, right? So one of the elements I'd like to be able to see in a sheriff is to possibly implement policies that's not going to kill someone that's not a danger to society, someone who is using a $20 counterfeit bill, someone who possibly might have walked off with a taser. I don't believe is a danger to society, right? You cannot kill someone with a fake $20 bill. You can't kill someone with a taser, even though harm can be done. So what I'd like to see in an ideal world, is someone in charge who is going to just make sure that fairness is across the board. Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense. And look, one of the assets that I think I bring is I'm very good at knowing what I know, and I know what I don't know. And one of the things I know is that, the sheriff's department alone can't fix the problem, that, there are conversations that have to be had in individual households, and conversations that need to be had with adults and kids. But as the sheriff of Broward County, I promise every citizen this, and if anybody disagrees with the statement, then I'm probably not your candidate. But I promise everyone this, that I'm going to treat everyone equally and fair. And I'm not looking to have any policies that discriminate against anyone. And if I have officers or deputies or employees that want to treat someone differently based on their race, then they shouldn't be an employee of mine, because, this is 2020. We're all adults, we're all humans. We're all here to feed our families and do the right thing. If you break the law, then you should see whatever happens. If it's an arrestable issue, then you get arrested. But we're not looking to treat anybody any differently. But I do know, though, like I said, as the sheriff, I can only affect so much change. But there needs to be a conversation in the community as a whole. And I wish our local elected officials would get rid of some of the partisan discussions, because I think, Ted, if, I did a radio interview earlier today, and there were 4 individuals on there, and we were talking, and we're all much closer in our beliefs and thoughts than the news media will give us credit for. And we can't let things keep dividing us as a society, because it's tearing us apart. After 9/11, we came together as a country and patriotism. And since that time, it's just been eroded. And a lot of it is due to the political nature of things. And it's sad, because I have friends that I've known for years that, they get in conversations with each other about politics and they don't talk anymore. And it's like, guys, you've known each other for 20 years. How are you not going to talk now because of, you support this person or don't support that person? We're still we're all humans. We're all, you need to do a better job of getting along. I mean, my grandmother used to say it when I was a kid all the time, get along. Like, what's the problem? I can just hear my grandmother now with a lot of things that's going on in the world. Some of the words that she would use would be, very interesting. But
we have Percy Johnson with us, who's joining us live, and he's asking about police brutality. That's one of the highlights nowadays on the media and on the minds of the constituents. So one of the other elephants in the room is COVID-19. And I'd love for you to be able to elaborate on how is it that a sheriff can maintain order on something that's not visible, but is everywhere. And it's new. So give us your thoughts on the public health practices of the sheriff's office.
Well, look, first and foremost, it starts with, making sure that the community can trust that the men and women of Broward Sheriff's Office that are responding to whatever calls they are, that they are safe themselves, that they have the proper PPE gear. Because when this first started back in March and April, the calls to 911 and the people that went to the emergency rooms dropped dramatically, because people were afraid that the first responders possibly had COVID and could give it to them. So from an internal position, we need to make sure that the men and women in the agency have the proper PPE gear, are protected, are taken care of. And actually, I did a PPE drive with one of the other candidates, Al Pollack, who's a Democrat. I reached across the aisle and I called him and I said, Al, look, I want to help the men and women of Broward Sheriff's Office. You know a bunch of people in different parts of the county. I know people in this part of the county. Let's see if we can get enough people to give some gear to help the men and women of the agency. And we put it together. And I thought it was successful. Some people said, well, you didn't raise thousands and thousands and thousands of pieces of equipment. But we raised, 10,000 gloves, masks, things like that. So with regard to the community itself, is we need to do the best job we can with educating the community about the real facts and not misleading information. As a sheriff's office, we need to have a constant message that doesn't change, and it's constant in letting the community know, what the current orders are, what's the current state of affairs with regard to curfews and things like that. COVID shouldn't be used for political reasons to shut down, certain businesses, or shouldn't be used for political reasons to shut down.
Absolutely. COVID-19 is an equal opportunity attacker. Absolutely. Doesn't matter.
100%. Yeah. Well, I mean, and look, I think, with COVID, look, it caught everybody off guard, right? I don't think anybody ever expected in our lifetime to live through something like this, but we've been around it long enough to be able to educate ourselves, to make sure that we are protecting ourselves. One thing that shocked me is, I don't know, I grew up, my grandmother was the biggest wash your hands person I've ever met. I've just, you know, when this first kicked off, it's like wash your hands. I'm thinking, but that's what you do anyway. But, you know, I guess it's one of those messages that needed to be said. But
you have a question. You have a question here live from Lourdes Diaz, and the question is, would you create a mental health division within BSO to deal with nonviolent situations or traumatized police officers?
Well, look, we need to address mental health as a society. Absolutely. You know, we need to address mental health in two factors. One, we need to address mental health issues with the men and women that work at the agency. You know, first responders see the baddest of baddest incidents, the worst of the worst. They see horrific things, you know, way more than anybody else, any other segment of society. So obviously there are issues there that need to be addressed from a mental health standpoint. We need to erase the part where people feel like they can't talk about mental health issues, because in the past it seemed as if when you had mental health issues, you were frowned upon, you were afraid of being fired. We need to get rid of that label or that stigmatism. So yeah, we need to address mental health within the agency, and we also need to address mental health in the community as well. I was talking to someone earlier today, and they asked me, they're like, "Well, the mental health stuff, what do you mean?" For instance, if a homeless person is going down Broward Boulevard causing chaos, right? The deputies have one of two choices. They can arrest them, or they can take them to a local hospital where, when they're stabilized, they're released. That doesn't help that individual whatsoever, right? From a mental health standpoint, it doesn't. Also, mental health is huge to me for school safety. You can have all the active duty training or active shooter training, all of the training you want to engage an active shooter, but why do we have to let it get that far? Why can't we work with our youth to be able to prevent those things the best that we can? And that's being addressed by mental health. You have to increase mental health in Broward County. It's time. It's been a subject that a lot of people haven't wanted to talk about. It's been a subject that oftentimes is frowned upon. You know, another example I give is that, you know, there's a homicide scene. Obviously, you know, law enforcement needs to be there to investigate the homicide, right? They need to figure out who committed the murder. But we also, I don't know that a law enforcement officer talking to a grieving family is necessarily the best approach. Why can't we have, you know, someone with mental health training dealing with the family who's grieving like that? So, you know, there are things we can implement from a mental health standpoint that are a must. So if anybody that's not looking at mental health is doing a disservice to the citizens of Broward County.
As an educator, I totally concur with that response. Now, we have to talk about another elephant in the room. You mentioned the word earlier, and I'm hearing you. And again, this is not meant to put you on the spot. I just really would like to give the constituents the opportunity to get to know you. You mentioned the word Democrat. You are running as a Republican candidate in a county that is predominantly Democrat. Talk to us about that. I think that's brave. So talk to us about that.
Look, I said it in the very beginning. When I moved here in 2001, and the first time I voted for the sheriff of Broward County, and I realized that it was a Republican or a Democrat, it blew my mind, because safety is truly, it's nonpartisan.
I agree.
It certainly should be. If you're driving home tonight,
it should be a nonpartisan race, right?
100%. If you're driving home tonight and you get pulled over, if somebody asks you if you're a Republican or Democrat, that individual should be fired. It's just nothing to do with safety. Same thing. You call 911 tonight and your house is on fire. You know, well, are you a Republican or a Democrat? No, my house is on fire. They're coming to put out the fire. So it's a big task, because Broward County is predominantly Democrat. What I do know, though, is that, you know, from a Republican can win in Broward County. I think you got to have the right platform.
How is that? I'm curious. How is that?
Look, I think you got to have the right platform. I think it's in this particular race, it's looking like Scott Israel is probably going to be who's going to come out of that primary. There's 6 individuals that are fighting it out. If you do the math, it's probably going to take somewhere in the low 30,000 vote number to win the Democratic primary. Scott has his fans and he has his enemies. But one of the things, if you look at the national, the way Broward County politics are, you got to look. There are more registered Democrats, but Republicans vote more than Democrats. So it's really who votes that
That's
actually
important.
makes the
That's
count.
important. Let me replay that for the viewers. There are more Democrats than Republicans. However, more Republicans vote than Democrats. Okay, that's something that
On a percentage-wise, yeah. Yeah,
that's something
percentage-wise,
that we
absolutely.
definitely have to keep in mind. Very, very, very interesting. So what are your projections? What are your numbers? What are you looking at? What would you need to win ideally?
So
Even
look,
though this is not, even though these interviews are open to all candidates and these are not endorsement interviews,
yeah.
but I'm curious to hear what your strategy is.
So look, I'm not going to tell you all my strategies. I kind of let it play out, right? But I can tell you though. Look, you know, my biggest thing is serving in the military is that I want people to vote. I don't care I want you to vote for me, but I don't care who you vote for. But use that right. You know, that's something that a lot of great men and women fought and died for. And as a veteran of the United States Army. That's something that I hold sacred to me. So I hope everybody votes. But to win this election, I believe that if you look at my platform, that it's time to make changes at BSO. It's a public safety agency. Where everybody reports their work in Broward Boulevard is called the Public Safety Building. It's not the law enforcement building. It's not Broward law enforcement. It's a public safety agency, and it's time it's run that way, because we're not going to fix the problems with Broward County if we keep keep electing the same people going down the same track. You've got to be able to approach things a little differently, and I believe I'm that candidate. I'm the only candidate that has the background that I have. I'm very unique. I'm not biased. So I've never been in law enforcement, so I don't have that law enforcement bias. I'm going to be able to make decisions based on the individuals I have around me. I'm going to have a great undersheriff who's going to run law enforcement. I'm also going to have a great fire chief. So I'm also going to, work with the unions. I believe in communications. I don't always agree with everything they say, but ultimately, having a communications is vital.
So, but in your case as an attorney, I understand what you're saying. However, you don't believe that it's necessary to have law enforcement experience in order to become a better sheriff?
Well, Ted, I can tell you this. I can tell you the first sheriff of Broward County was not law enforcement. Right. And I can tell you that since then, a number of sheriffs have not had law enforcement experience. Right. And if you talk to the men and women at the agency and you ask them, and I've asked every one of them, and who knows, maybe they tell me what I want to hear. I hope not. I hope they tell me the truth. But what I've heard, I've spoken to, I would say close to 1,000, if not more, individuals from the agency. And what I always hear is that the leaders who were not law enforcement officers made better decisions for the agency as a whole and ran it better. Because ultimately, Sheriff Tony right now is not running the law enforcement aspect of the day-to-day. That's what the undersheriff does. The undersheriff has that responsibility. And so a part of my administration will be to push down some responsibility and making sure we have the right people in the right place. I'm there to manage the overall agency. It's similar to the Dolphins, right? The owner of the Dolphins or the CEO or whatever the technical title is for whoever runs the organization, never played football, but he can manage the agency. Maybe that's a bad example because the Dolphins don't really have many winning seasons, unfortunately. But you understand what I'm saying, right? Like Pat Riley, yeah.
I totally understand. Mr. Clark, if you give me a chance to just take a step back, because I use these interviews also as academic opportunities for my students. I archive them, and I actually assign these throughout the school year. I assign these interviews for extra credit opportunities for my students. So there's some terminology I'd like for you to be able to explain when it comes to the electoral process. So one of the viewers on right now with us, Percy Johnson, mentioned the closed primary elections. Please explain what is a closed primary election, because I'm not necessarily sure we have that in other states, and I would like for high schoolers and middle schoolers to understand, even though they cannot vote at the moment, maybe upon them graduating, but I'd like for them to understand what is an open primary and what is an open election and what is a closed election.
Sure. So when you have a partisan race, meaning you have a Republican and Democrat, because right now in America we have primarily a two-party system.
Right.
What you have is, as long as you have someone running on the Republican side and the Democratic side, it means it's a closed primary. You can only vote for the party that you're registered for. For instance, in my race here in Broward County, we have a Republican that's running, and we have a Democrat. So in the primary election on August 18th, you're only going to be able to vote for a Republican if you are a Republican. If you're a Democrat, you're only able to vote for a Democrat.
Right.
However, if in a partisan race, there's only one party. For instance, I think in this particular election, the public defender's office, I believe, only has registered Democrats running. Therefore, it's an open primary, meaning anybody can vote. Nonpartisans, independents, Republicans, and Democrats can vote in an open race where there's nobody running against them. I think the state attorney has someone supervise the election. I think it's only the public defender in this particular race. So when in Broward County you vote on August 18th, you're able to vote for anybody in the public defender's office, which is different. Judges are nonpartisan, so anybody can vote for in a nonpartisan
which is what your race is supposed to be.
100%, yeah.
Right. So for the sake of simplicity for my students, so hypothetically, in a few days, really, because August 18th is around the corner, if there are 5 Republicans running for sheriff and 5 Democrats running for sheriffs, right? The people who are registered as Republicans will have the opportunity to choose among the Republicans. The people who are registered as Democrats will have the opportunity to choose only among the Democrats, correct? And
Correct.
those who are registered as independent cannot vote at all for those candidates.
In a closed primary race, correct. They're not able to. The independents will be able to vote for the judicial races, the school board races, nonpartisan. Some city councils are nonpartisan.
Now, correct me, but now please bring me up to speed. At this point, are you the only Republican candidate in this race?
No, I have one competitor who has failed to campaign at all. He hasn't shown up to any of the forums. He hasn't shown up to any of the debates. He hasn't shown up to any of the meetings. I have my theories as to why he's in the race to make sure that it is a closed primary race, because why would you run for a position if you don't campaign, right? Look, an election is simply I'm drawing a word, but it's an
election is a popularity
contest.
The more the people know your name, the more likely they'll remember to vote for you. As a former candidate, I can tell you that. Right. So essentially, you're going to get through the primaries eyes closed.
Correct. It's a closed primary. Yes.
In your case.
Yeah, in this particular race, yes, a closed primary, yes. Right. In this race,
so,
yes.
So you're expecting to have a Democratic opponent in November.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, awesome. And we have no idea who, because we have more Democratic candidates, more so than Republican candidates. And since you're saying that your Republican opponent has not been really showing up, most likely you'll be the nominee going into November. Okay, now that we have the pandemic and we are shelter in place and everyone's wearing masks and I'm not necessarily sure if the curfew has been lifted, but folks are actually limited involvement outside in public. How are you campaigning?
So actually Broward County today extended the curfew, I believe, until August 3rd or August 5th. They extended it by a few days today. It's tough. It's very tough. We had a lot of events scheduled for March, April, and May. Obviously, those had to be canceled. My primary campaigning is grassroots. It's social media. It's getting to know people. I personally deliver yard signs, door hangers, things like that. I try to social distance. I try to go to as many events that they have in person. A lot of those are very far and few between, and it's strictly a grassroots campaign where I'm making calls. I pick up the phone and I call individuals. If somebody emails me, I email them back. If somebody engages me on social media, I'm the one responding. It's me, and I have a very small campaign staff of dedicated people, but it's very tough. COVID makes it tough. There are candidates out there that are holding fundraisers and things like that. I would love to hold a fundraiser because campaigns cost money, but I just don't know that I don't want someone coming to one of my functions and getting sick because of me.
Right.
I take responsibility for myself.
That's very considerate considering the president of the United States. So that's very considerate.
No, look, there's a lot of information out there about COVID, right? I think there's a lot of misinformation as well. It's clearly real, right? People are dying every day from it. I think we don't know enough about it because it's so new. It's one of those things. Look, I take self-responsibility. I go out, I go into the community. I have a 10-year-old son. I'm very careful as to who he interacts with and what he does. Because as a father, I want to make sure I do everything I can in his best interest. Me, myself, if I go out and I was to get sick because I was at something, I'm going to take self-responsibility for that. I try to, I wash my hands, I have sanitizer, I have face coverings, things like that. I try not to be in very large groups. If I am, it's very short periods of time to take pictures, things like that. But look, I don't think this thing's not going to magically disappear. It's not going to go away overnight. It's going to take some time. So we're in this for a long haul.
Right. Okay. Again, for academic purposes, for the sake of my students who will see this video, talk to us philosophically, because I do believe, and we probably say this every cycle, that this is the most important election year, but I do believe that this is a very important election cycle. What does it mean to be a Republican?
This is probably one of the most important election cycles for Broward County, the state of Florida, in our country. For the first time in 44 years, Broward County is going to elect a new supervisor of election, state attorney, public defender, and sheriff, all in one race on November 3rd, 2020. Yes. That has huge ramifications for changing the direction.
Statewide, yeah. And possibly countrywide.
Absolutely. Look, my mom and dad, when I grew up, we never talked about politics. My dad never once said, Wayne, you're going to be a Republican. My dad instilled into me conservative values. I am physically conservative, meaning financially conservative, and I'm socially liberal on a number of things. So I identify, I guess, more with my core principles with the Republican side than the Democratic side. But, again, I don't think that this position has anything to do with partisanship because it's safety. It's making the community safe. It's nothing to do with politics. I'm going to ensure that when I'm elected, I'm going to try to make sure that this particular position in Florida, the constitutional officer, is changed to a nonpartisan position because this position should be the best man or woman running for the position should get it. It shouldn't depend on what party you're in.
Right. All right. So
the picture went away.
Yes. No. If you see that, it's probably because maybe the family's calling. So just keep on speaking, okay. And so forth. So because many times candidates, and we're not going to mention any names out of respect, I just want to be able to just kind of give an example. Many times candidates change parties in order to be able to appeal to the masses. And you decided to not do that in a county where, this is Blue Broward, right? This is Democratic Town Broward. And I believe, and I respect anyone who is going to actually kind of stick to their principles and who they really are, because you may also run the risk of losing votes if you were to switch parties, because we can track that over time. So I just was wondering philosophically, what does it mean to be a Republican? Because this is a partisan race, even though I agree with you, it should not be a partisan race. What does it mean to be a Republican, even though you stated that you're a liberal? And I appreciate that because I'm a Democrat, but I also say I'm a moderate Democrat because there are some conservative ideas I may actually support as well. I'm strong for family, right? I'm strong for education. And when I hear certain people speak on both sides, I really don't know the difference. I'm asking because I really don't know the difference, to be honest with you, not to put you in a hot seat. But when I hear
Right.
Republicans speak, there are many things I agree with. And when I hear Democrats speak, there are many things I agree with, and there are things that I don't agree with on both sides. So I don't know what's the difference too much. I really don't know the difference between what it means to be a Republican and a Democrat, and then what would it mean to be a Republican sheriff in Broward County.
Look, whenever I decided to kick off my campaign, I had family members mention to me, "Hey, look, you're going to you're going to run as a Republican. Are you worried about losing business because of it?" It's always something that you run the risk of. I met with a group of families in a certain part of the county that had a horrific incident happen, and they told me Republicans can't win in Broward County. If you really want to win this election, switch to become a Democrat and do basically the Broward two-step is what they call it. I couldn't do that. I agree with you. I think that if you look at it from this is how because my son has asked me the difference. Daddy, what's the difference between a Republican and a Democrat?
Right.
And I try to explain it to my son in saying that I don't look at people by their party. I look at whether they're good people or evil people, good people or bad people. And so when I think of myself as a Republican, I just think of myself as someone who, maybe it's because I've gotten older and I get more conservative as I get older. You get grouchy, I don't know. But, from a financial standpoint, I try to be as conservative as possible because I want to leave my son and my family something, God forbid something happens to me prematurely. Even when I get older, I want to make sure they're taken care of financially. I don't believe in wasting money.
Stop right there. With all due respect to you, sir, that's not Republican or Democrat. That's everybody.
I'm telling you. I agree with you.
That's everybody.
That's what I'm saying.
So one can be conservative and not be Republican or Democrat. One can be liberal and not be Republican or Democrat.
Right. So look, there are. So from a social standpoint, what you choose to do in your home, I don't care. As long if you're breaking the law, if you're committing murder or some massive domestic violence, things like that, that's different. What you choose to do in your home, that's what you choose to do in your home. Ted, it's funny because I honestly believe if you put 100 people in the room and there are 50 Democrats and 50 Republicans, and you don't tell each other what you are, you sit there and you have conversation for an hour. My bet is 95 to 99%. You're going to agree to the same things. I think that unfortunately
it happens every day.
Yeah.
It happens every day. It happens every day.
Yeah.
As a person who is a master at networking before COVID-19, it happens every day. There are people I found out were Republicans, had no clue. I have family members, immediate, close genetic members of my family who are Republicans that never knew. So, if you don't bring it up, if you don't choose to put that label on you, then, it really won't matter.
Yeah. Right. Look, I've had lots of conversations throughout this campaign with many people that start off with basically saying, you're a Republican, therefore you're racist. You're a Republican, therefore you believe this. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Give me 10 minutes and I'll talk to you.
Where does that come from? Where does the connection between certain philosophies and the Republican Party come from?
It's interesting because, I'm a political science minor. I was trying to get a political science major in college, but I was a political science major, but I wanted to be a history major. So, if you study politics and everything, there was the switch from Democrats to Republicans and the way things switched back. And I don't remember, it's late in the day. I don't remember what years and what decades that was. I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't know what's the reason of why everyone believes that a certain party believes a certain thing. I don't know. Like I said, my parents never talked about politics when I grew up, and they never said, my dad never said, well, Republicans are racist and Democrats are this, or Democrats are this and Republicans are that. We never talked about it. To be honest with you, I have no clue what party my father is a member of. I've never asked him. I've never checked.
Do you think the President of the United States, and you're welcome to decline to answer, do you think the President of the United States is doing a good job in terms of representing the party, or are there, and I already know the answer to this, but I'm asking for the sake of our viewers and our constituents, do you think that there are members of the party who are not satisfied with the president?
I think, look, I'm not happy with some of his tone. Sometimes I'm not happy with some of his Twitter exchanges. I think it's a way of him getting his message out without it being changed or diluted to the public, and so that you can see what he really thinks and what he really says, as opposed to having to be interpreted by the media. I think that in this election, especially, the Democrats had an opportunity to put someone up there that could have really really given him, a run for his money, for lack of a better word. Mm-hmm. I think unfortunately with Biden, I just think he had some cognitive issues. I was asked when I was endorsed by the Sun Sentinel, one of the individuals in the endorsement process asked me that question. I think the question was, and I'd have to go back and look at the tape. I think the question was, how could you vote for Donald Trump? And I said, I can't vote for Joe Biden because of the cognitive issues, because he does have some issues with his memory. That's what I personally believe. So I think that unfortunately sometimes politics is the lesser of two evils, right? You got to look at who's up there and you pick who you think is going to be the lesser of the two evils. From an economic standpoint, I think the president has done a good job. I do wish that we could come together better as a nation. I wish we had, on a state, on a local level, we had leaders that did a better job of bringing us together. Unfortunately, I feel like sometimes with the news that some of our officials haven't been given, give them a break a little bit. Let them see what they can do, and then if they don't do a good job, then hammer them. That's what the news is for. But sometimes the tone, I think, is a little bit off. But
I would agree with you. I would agree with you. Now, for the sake of time, as you know, I am an educator. One of the policies I'd like to see as a potential sheriff for our county is a relationship with education. I would like to see, and this is me wishful thinking, and whoever is going to win this race, I'm going to hold him, and I say him because they're only male candidates at this point, I'm going to hold him accountable for this endeavor. I'd like to see young people be introduced to your world for good reasons as opposed to bad reasons. I'd like to be able to see programs whereby the Broward County School Board and the Sheriff's Office create an even closer relationship whereby kids can possibly do internships. And I'll even go a step further. This is wishful thinking, because there are 24 credits required in order for a young person to obtain a high school diploma in the state of Florida. I'd like to see one of those credits be given to your office, whereby they have to either spend a few days with you, do some ride-alongs. I mean, that may be dangerous, or maybe spend some time in the office, write a paper. What are your thoughts about how young people, and the reality is oftentimes it is young people who look like myself, young children of color, who have bad experiences with law enforcement. What are your thoughts about possibly creating educational programs to keep young people out of the system?
I think that's a task by the sheriff that needs to be undertaken. I think whoever's running that agency needs to do a better job with working with the youth. And there are certainly other youth programs throughout the country that Broward Sheriff's Office could look into doing. And I agree with you. A lot of people don't like school resource officers right now. A lot of people don't like having police officers or deputies involved in the school system. But I think, look, a school is basically in Broward County, it's almost like a mini city, right? Some of the schools have 5,000 kids. In every city, you have law enforcement, Massive. You have teachers. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I would like to see the youth, at least a chance to have the youth see what goes on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely.
And for the deputies to also see what these kids go through on a day-to-day basis. Because look, I'm in my mid 40s, right? I remember high school. I remember going to school, but sometimes it's good to go back and remember what it was like to live in that kind of part of your life, right? Because we all go through different stages of lives, and in different stages we have different wants and needs. And I think that for the officers, I think it'd be a good thing to go back and relate better to the kids and what they're going through and what they're seeing. Because if you have that open dialogue, I have a friend that tells me this all the time. He tells me in his neighborhood that if they see a BSO officer come, many people run because they automatically think they're going to get in trouble or something's going on, something bad's happening. And somebody laughed at me for saying this before, and that's fine. I don't care. I have thick skin. I'd like to see it where, someone rides through the neighborhood and the officer or deputy waves and the individual waves back, and it becomes a friendly relationship. Because if we work together, nobody, for the most part, nobody wants crime in their neighborhood. Nobody wants, those things that go on in their neighborhood. And so, if you build that relationship and there is someone that is committing murder or something, and you have a relationship with the community, that community is much more likely to cooperate with you than if they automatically see you as the enemy. And we've got to take down those walls.
Right. I'm trying to kind of formulate the question because there are quite a few ways I can form this question about improving relationship between cops and community. And you mentioned something very important. And let me ask you before I ask you my next question, do you think that police officers should live in the cities that they police? And because I have asked this before, and some police officers will no, because there might be retaliation. Or is it possible that if my police officer, my local police officer is my neighbor, and he knows who I am, and if I'm committing a crime, he is less likely to shoot me dead, right? So what are your thoughts on police officers actually living in the cities which they police?
I can tell you that most of the individuals at Broward Sheriff's Office on law enforcement, they live in Palm Beach County. Okay. Most people don't know that. What I believe is we have a lot of great men and women in Broward County. And I understand, the police officers or deputies that would say from law enforcement, hey, look, if I live there, I might be retaliated on. But I think that if you had a better integration or if you had those individuals from those communities, because look, it's very simple, right? What happens in Parkland is different than what happens in Hollywood. It's Absolutely. Different than what happens in Weston. It's different than what happens in Fort Lauderdale. It's different than what happens in Dania or Miramar, or Tamarack, Pompano. And so you've got to know the communities that you're in. And what happens in each community is a little different. And each community has different needs and different wants. And if you can't see those, or you don't understand those, or you're not willing to look at them, you're never going to be able to, I hate to say this way, but kind of fit in and make the community safer. Because look, community safety is just that. It's the community and the law enforcement aspect of it working together. So, if you could have people from those communities in the agency, I don't see how it could hurt. I just don't. I was asked that question in a debate regarding fire and EMS, because if you look at the number of individuals in fire and EMS based strictly on race, there's a lot of minorities not accounted for in fire and EMS. And I, part of it is the community has to trust the agency to want to go to work and want to go do that. So the community applies, and you got to be willing to take them, and you got to be, you need a diverse staff in a multi-diverse county. I believe in a lot of what happens at Broward Sheriff's Office is political in nature. And I think if you take politics out of that agency, you're going to make all of the citizens in Broward County safer.
Now, I'm trying to wrap this up because we have quite a few things that we haven't even talked about yet, but please elaborate on the value of diversity of BSO. Why is it important to have BSO be diverse, considering that, you're coming from the perspective of a white male? So I'd like to know, what are your thoughts on making sure that BSO is diverse, and why?
Look, my goal and my mission and my platform is simple. I want to treat everyone equally, and I want to treat everyone the same. I want to promote based on time and rank, based on qualifications. I want to promote based on, who is the best person for that job. I don't want race to be a part of that. but you have to be a diverse agency because Broward County is a diverse community. You've got to represent the community as a whole. I don't, like I said before, the individuals that are going to work for me and we're going to make hiring decisions, and we're going to bring in a real human resource. We didn't talk about this, but we're going to bring in a real human resources department. Right now, human resources in Broward is run by law enforcement. There's nothing wrong with law enforcement, but you need a real human resources leader there. You need someone that does, this hiring and training and things like that. And so you've got to be able to make the agency representative of the community, but you also got to know that, we need the community's help with applying for the jobs too, right? Because if you don't apply, then you can't get a job. But also, I want the men and women of the agency to know that I'm not going to promote somebody based on political reasons. I'm going to promote you and you're going to rise through the ranks because you're the most qualified person. A lot of what I hear from the men and women of the agency, no matter what race, no matter what sexual orientation they are, they feel like they're sometimes overlooked because a new sheriff comes in, brings in buddies from somewhere else, and they don't get those good details. They don't get those good promotions. They don't get those good assignments because of political reasons. That has to stop because that's what kills morale.
Right.
And that's a long-winded answer, but your question is, there's so much to your question, it's hard to answer shortly.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a loaded question because diversity allows you to have perspectives that you cannot see, right? You're not going to be able to see the angle from a woman's perspective. You're not going to be able to see the angle from a person's of color perspective. So you are able to actually have a wide array of outlooks if you have a diverse team in order to make better decisions. Now, speaking of decisions, I have one more question for you before I ask you to make your closing statement. Would you, as a potential sheriff, would you eliminate chokeholds or possibly shooting unarmed individuals in our communities?
So it's my understanding that the current policies and procedures at Broward Sheriff's Office is that there aren't the same kind of chokeholds that led to what happened in Minneapolis. I agree with you. There has to be a better way to detain an individual than a chokehold. The shooting of unarmed individuals, that's look, every fact pattern is a little bit different, right? Law enforcement officers are tasked with making a split-second decision on something that may impact someone else's life and their life. If someone is unarmed and someone is no threat to someone else or no threat to law enforcement, there's no reason to use excessive force. So, if someone uses excessive force, that needs to be investigated and taken care of. Every fact pattern is a little bit different. So, I think I answered your question, but if I didn't, feel free to ask a follow-up. But, de-escalation is important to me. I know that's a popular buzzword right now.
Absolutely.
There are ways.
De-escalation saves lives.
Yeah, there are ways to train. And look, I was asked this in a social media platform probably 2 or 3 weeks ago now. And I was asked a question. It was kind of worded a little bit different than yours, but it was, do you think that law enforcement is trained in a way that forces them into that, immediate, full force, 100 miles an hour, go at it and
to kill.
Do that?
Right.
Yeah, shoot to kill. Yeah, and look, that's part of the process that needs to be adjusted. That's why you need training. Look, you need to get better every day, right? We're not perfect. We're human beings, and we need to strive to get better every day. And by doing that, we need to adjust the training. We need to look at training protocols. We need to look at what is in place at Broward Sheriff's Office, because de-escalation is huge, and it's not just a buzzword. It actually means something. It's actually trying to use less forms of lethal force.
Saves lives. De-escalation saves lives.
Yeah,
right,
and you're not always going to be able to de-escalate a situation, but if you can, you should. That should be the first thing you try to do. But
absolutely. All right, Mr. Clark, as the Republican candidate for Broward County Sheriff, we are coming to the closing of our interview. Please give the residents and viewers of Broward County your closing statement as to why you are the best candidate to be our sheriff in Broward County in 2020.
So it's simple. What's gone on in Broward County in the last number of years is that politics has taken over the agency, and it's caused a lot of issues. For the first time in our history, we have had 2 votes of no confidence. My main thing is to take politics out of the agency. If you're a citizen or you live in Broward County or you visit Broward County, just like I said earlier, the Broward Sheriff's Office touches every aspect from the seaport to the airport to the jails to mental health, law enforcement, fire, EMS, the courthouse, detention. I already said that, the call centers as mental health and community services program. You need a leader in BSO that can handle all of those and not just one aspect. You need a leader in BSO that's not biased in any way, that's going to come in and implement policies and procedures that makes the community safer and brings the morale back at the agency. And I'm that individual. And if you look at my platform and you look at what I stand for, I just want to make the agency better. I want the agency to shine. I want it to be something where if you live in another state, you look at BSO, it's something you want to role model after. I'm, for lack of a better way of saying it, I'm just tired of seeing the negativity. I'm tired of seeing in the news, it seems like every day an article comes out that something's going on in the agency that's not right, whether it's, money here, money there. And it's just, we got to take that away from Broward Sheriff's Office. Let somebody else be that negative part. Let another county, let another agency do that. Right. Let's let the men and women of Broward Sheriff's Office shine, because there's a lot of great people that work there, and there's a lot of great people that have, that's their life. That's what they live to do, and it's sad because some of them feel like they don't have due process rights. Some of them feel like that the current administration doesn't have their back. And as the leader, you have to take responsibility, and you have to change culture. And if you're not willing to change the culture, then you're going to get status quo, and you're never going to change.
Awesome. Well, there you have it, social media land. This is Ted Victor, and the time is approximately 8 p.m. on Wednesday, the 29th of July. This evening, we have spoken exclusively with Mr. Wayne Clark, candidate for Broward County Sheriff, Republican candidate for Broward County Sheriff. And I really thank all of the audience members, the viewers who have participated. And I ask you guys to please stay tuned. Tomorrow evening, we're going to have another interview, probably one every day this week. And we will be also interviewing other candidates for Sheriff's County. This is different than the forum where all of them are together, where they're giving you rapid fire responses in 1 or 2 minute time frames. This is the opportunity for you to really get to know the sheriff as an individual, actually, excuse me, the candidate as an individual for an hour. And Mr. Clark, I really appreciate you for making time to speak to us, to speak to the viewers of the Broward Social Network. And I sincerely wish you the very best of luck.
Thank you very much, Ted. I truly appreciate it. I enjoy watching your other shows. I don't enjoy being in the hot seat sometimes, but that's, hey, look, I'm applying for this job, and you've got to ask those questions, because the men and women of Broward County deserve to know where someone stands, and they deserve Clark, to know that.
When you show up to answer questions in the hot seat, showing up says a lot. There are others who don't show up, and the viewers are watching. The viewers are watching. And regardless of what happens, if you're going to become the sheriff, the seat is going to get even hotter. So. Oh,
absolutely. So
I appreciate you showing up.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And I thank you for having this platform, and I thank you for having that very first Sheriff's Forum, because, look, it's important. And I'm not the candidate for everybody, and I understand that. I want to be a sheriff that looks over every community and tries to do the best I can for every community. And I understand people don't agree with my platform sometimes, and I get that. But look, the most important thing is to vote. Whoever you're going to vote for, just vote. That's what America is about, is voting. So.
Considering that we fought for this right, folks have died for this right, we must definitely exercise our right to vote. And on that note, Mr. Clark, I thank you very much. Once all of this is over, I'm going to find a way to have a cup of coffee with you so I can spend some more time with you. I believe all of you candidates have something unique to offer to the voters of Broward County. And again, I thank you very much for coming to the Broward Social Network. You have a wonderful evening, and please, considering the pandemic, please stay safe.
You as well. Have a great evening, and God bless, Ted. Take care.
God bless. Thank you so very much. Thank you.
Thank you.